Call the Onslow County Board of Commissioners meeting for Monday, July 15th, 2024 to order at this time. And we'll start with our Assistant County Manager, Mr. Ben Warren, leading us in the invocation.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come before you to conduct the business of Onslow County. God, we ask that you'll guide the commissioners tonight in their deliberations and bless them with wisdom and discernment in the decisions they make. Father, we pray for your protection over our armed forces and first responders who serve our country with tremendous courage, commitment, and sacrifice. And may all we do this day bring you honor and glory. And we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Now, with deep respect and reverence for the faiths, beliefs, and traditions of those gathered here today, join us in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Today we have with us Lexi Gilkey, the Youth Voice Delegate representing Onslow County at the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners 117th Annual Conference, leading us in the board's Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lexi. I'd like to acknowledge our elected officials this evening, and I believe that is Sheriff Chris Thomas in the back for us this evening. So always good to have the sheriff here on Monday nights. And we also asked everyone in attendance to please set your cell phones to silent or vibrate mode. The board offers the public one opportunity to speak during the meeting, and comments should be limited to no more than 5 minutes and may be on any issue upon which the Board of Commissioners has control. In accordance with the board's adopted rules of procedure, commissioners shall reserve comments or responses, if any, for the commissioner comment period on the agenda. Now we're at the item 1, a motion to adopt the agenda.
I make a motion to amend the agenda to add a resolution.
I have a motion to add a resolution to the agenda. We have a second. All in favor of adding the amendment or the resolution to the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none. We've made the amendment. Now we need a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, we have an agenda for this evening. Now we'll move to item 2 for a motion for the approval of the items on the consent agenda. Unless someone, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, motion carries. We will now move to item 3. Mr. Smitherman, public comment. All right, that was a quick public comment session, and we'll move into item 4, presentations, and the 2023 financial statement and audit report. Mr. Greg Miller will be presenting that at this time.
Good evening. My name is Greg Miller. I'm a director with Forvis Mazars, and I'm the individual who's responsible for signing the audit opinion within y'all's financial statements. So I'd first like to thank you in trusting Forvis Mazars to be your external auditor. And I just want to make one thing very clear, that these are your financial statements. This is your annual financial report. This document takes a lot of work from management, and this is the first year that management brought that in-house and wrote these financial statements internally rather than outsourcing that to a third party. Most localities within the state of North Carolina outsource it to other parties, but there's a pride factor here that finance wanted to bring this in-house and write their financial statements to be able to tell their own financial story rather than fitting in some third party's prescribed format. So there's a big sense of pride behind these numbers in these financial statements. Within that document, maybe a dozen pages are Forvis Mazars, the rest is the county's information. So it's really a testament when a locality can say that they can write their own ACFR, Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, internally, because that is saying that your management has the skills, the knowledge, and the experience to write this type of document internally. So just as being the first year in a very long time I wanted to make that clear at the beginning of the financial statement, or beginning of my presentation. With that, I did kind of cut out the agenda slide of my presentation. I'm going to talk about what we're engaged to do, the results of that, and then some required communications with the auditing standards of, regardless of the size of entity, I'd have to tell those charged with governance about. So within the scope of our engagement, we were engaged to perform an audit of Onslow County's financial statements for the year ended June 30, 2023. Our audit was performed under a variety of various standards. I have those kind of listed to the side, 1 through 5, the first being the generally accepted auditing standards. Those are just your generic auditing standards, whether you're IMB, Microsoft, Onslow County, a small non-for-profit, everyone's audit falls under that. The second one, based upon the type of entity, is the government auditing standards, so governmental entities that have compliance audits. There's an additional layer of auditing standards that we have to apply in performing our audit. The third one, based upon the nature of some of your revenue streams, being federal grants, and for number 4, state grants, requires some compliance audits to be performed on the oversight and expenditures of federal and state compliance requirements. So that's number 3 and number 4. And number 5, with the passenger facility charge program at the airport, that is another compliance audit that is over that particular program. So those are the 5 main standards in which we perform our audit. And kind of a little more description if you wanted to read the slide of what that entails. In governmental audits, within the financial reporting entity, there's always a number of entities in there. You have your governmental activities, which is typically your governmental funds, or not typically, it is your governmental funds. Your business type activities, which are your enterprise funds, sometimes your internal service funds, and then there's component units. There's discretely presented blended component units. I could talk an hour just on the difference between those two. But you do have 2 discretely presented component units that were not within the scope of our audit engagement. Those were audited by other auditors. We did not perform any audit work over those 2 entities that are reported within your financial statements. Our opinion on the county's financial statements as it relates to those 2 is solely based on those other auditors that performed audits of the hospital authority and the ABC board. Within this document, there's various different sections. So the table of contents will be a place to look for guidance on those, but required supplementary information, or RSI for short, primarily consists of management discussion analysis, some pension and OPEB not 10-year trend tables, and some budget to actual schedules primarily make up your RSI. We applied limited procedures to that information within these financial statements, such as comparing it to financial records, inquiries with management, how it was developed in prior years compared to how it was developed this year. But those levels of procedures don't provide us sufficient audit evidence to issue an opinion on that information. That's standard, normal industry terminology. Every other ACFR, the RSI is not audited. There's no opinion or any assurance within the RSIs. Also within the financial statement is supplementary information. So this is additional information that's added to the financial statements to provide the correct historical context, economical context, et cetera, et cetera. That also includes your schedule of expenditures of federal and state awards and your schedule of passenger facility charges and expenditures. That information, the information that's used to develop those schedules has been subjected to auditing, our audit procedures. So we do issue an in relation to opinion that says that those financial statements are in all material consistency with the financial statements taken as a whole, because they're derived from the same information that was subjected to audit to build the financial statements. Then the last section of the financial statements, or the ACFR, is other information. This is namely the introductory section, which has a letter transmittal, pretty much the story of the county, what's going on during the year, highlights and kind of some forward-looking information, and then the statistical section, which is on the back end, which are 10-year trend tables. Due to the context of those sections, we can't apply auditing procedures to those, so we do not issue an opinion on that section and provide no assurance on those 2 sections. From an independent standpoint, we're required to be independent of the county, so we do evaluate our independence, both each of you individually, the board as a whole, management individually, to ensure that not only myself, but Forvis Mazars is independent of the county, so that we can be a true clean set of eyes looking at the financial statements. In developing or in performing our evaluation, there are certain procedures that we perform that are called non-attest services. So there's standard services that a CPA firm might perform for their client, but they do have an impact on independence. Those are bulleted out on here, assistance with developing some items with management. We've evaluated those, identified that there are sufficient safeguards to mitigate those threats to not impede our independence. So we are independent of the county. With that, I'll kind of go to the results of the audit. These are kind of the next couple slides are the ones that you probably are waiting for me to say and say, Greg, you're hurrying up. You can get past this first couple slides and get to this one. So we have audited the statements of the county for the year ended June 30, 2023, and have issued our opinions and our reports thereon that were dated June 30, 2024. The first bullet is the report on financial statements. So we have issued an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. That is the type of audit opinion you are looking for from your external auditors. As I mentioned, RSI, we do not audit. So there's a paragraph in there that says that we do not provide any assurance on the RSI section. The supplementary information has a clean in relation to opinion, and we did not audit the other information, that introductory section and the statistical section of the ACFR. Under the governmental auditing standards, as I mentioned on my first slide, there's a separate report on that that kind of goes over what our evaluation of internal controls were and compliance that we had to do that might have a direct material impact to the county related to any laws, regulations, certain laws and regulations that the county is subjected to. We did not identify any non-compliance that is required to be reported under the governmental auditing standards. I grouped on this one the federal and state as the first bullet on here. So we did perform our compliance audits from the OMB compliance supplement, which is your federal programs, and the audit manual, which is your state programs. And we did not have any non-compliance, material non-compliance that met the reporting thresholds. The last piece is that PFC, the Passenger Facility Charge Program, that's out at the airport. And again, there were no material non-compliances that required to be reported. For these two bullets on this slide, we are CPAs, we are not attorneys, so it does not provide any legal determination of the county's compliance with those programs. It's just OMB says we have to go test 1, 2, 3. We tested those, and there was no differences from what OMB asked us. It was not a full legal review of the county's compliance with those requirements. Internal control considerations. So in any audit, we would evaluate internal controls over financial reporting. We evaluate those controls solely for the purposes of designing our audit procedures, not for the purposes of expressing an opinion on the operating effectiveness of internal controls. So we do not express any opinion on the operating effectiveness of controls. If we did identify deficiencies, we would evaluate those deficiencies, what the magnitude of those would be, and depending on those, the magnitude dictates what the reporting ramifications are for that. Similarly, for internal control over compliance, internal control over financial reporting is all the controls that lead up to writing these financial statements. The compliance piece is our compliance test says, hey, did we find anything that went wrong? The internal control side says, hey, what are they doing to prevent anything to go wrong? But on the control side, we do some tests of compliance over controls. We do not issue an opinion on the operating effectiveness, but we are required to report on anything that we found from an internal control perspective over compliance. As I mentioned, the magnitude of the material weakness being your most significant deficiency being in the middle, and a deficiency being the least significant. And we did not identify any deficiencies in internal controls that we can consider to be material weaknesses. As I mentioned, this is for a planning purpose for a financial statement audit, so a lot of our judgment is involved in identifying what is to be tested, what is to be considered for reviews or walkthroughs, et cetera. So given those limitations, there still could be material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls that were not identified by the audit. In any course of a financial statement audit, there are conversations between the auditor and management on nuances within the financial statements. There are 2 uncorrected misstatements that are immaterial both individually and in the aggregate to the financial statements taken as a whole. The way the auditing standards work is this is the language I have to use in this presentation. But what I want you to take away from these 2 is that these 2 audit adjustments were not procedures that we performed, that we identified the difference and brought to management. Both of these were identified by management as an issue that was going on. They brought it to our attention with a solution and wanted our opinion. So these were not identified by my team. These were identified by management and brought to my team's attention. But based upon the nature, with the size of these dollars, you typically would restate those financial statements, or you could restate those financial statements or run them through the current year. The technical bean counting correct way to do it is not to run it through, but to restate the beginning period. That's a laborsome, burdensome process, so it's easier to run it through the current year. So both these adjustments for the LOBS premium amortization was just a nuance to where the amortization schedule was off the agreement, and this is to get it back to being agreed to the original agreement. And the IBNR was a portion that was not booked last year to bring that liability up to what it should be as of 6/30/23. Qualitative aspects from accounting principles and practices. The most significant accounting policies that you have are documented within Note 1 of the financial statements. I'd like to bring your attention to two new GASB standards that were implemented for fiscal year 23. The first being GASB 96, that's subscription-based IT arrangements. That was a new standard that everyone across the country with 6/30 year ends had to implement last year. If you would have recalled for 22, GASB 87 leases was the new standard. It's the sister statement to that, if you will, but over subscription-based IT arrangements. So most things now you subscribe to a software. That's the kind of stuff and scope. If you think it from a personal perspective, it's your LinkedIn account, or if you had a premium, or it's your Netflix account, that the county has those type of subscriptions going forward. Not saying the county has a subscription to Netflix, but the other standard that was implemented was GASB 100, which is accounting changes and error corrections. That one technically is not up for implementation, not required to be implemented until June 30, 2024. Management early implemented that standard in 2023, so they've gotten the one that's due for this year down under our belts at this point going forward, and implemented that for fiscal year 23 rather than waiting for 24. One of the reasons decided to implement that one early is, as described in Note 2, there was a change, restatement made to the financial statements for the Bear Creek Volunteer Fire Department. When GASB 84 rolled on in probably in 2020 timeframe, it all gets fuzzy around that timeframe from a timeline standpoint. That was brought on as a fiduciary activity, which means management may have custody of something, but they don't have control of the assets. They're just overwatching it, overseeing it for a third party. With the county taking over the operations of Bear Creek, management did have control of those assets. They could determine what to spend the money on or not spend the money on. So that doesn't belong as a fiduciary activity, and that belongs in a governmental fund. So it's been reclassed from a custodial fund, which is historically has been presented in the financial statements, into the general fund. So it's now included within the general fund type in here. It is an immaterial dollar amount. It's roughly $50,000. Which is much smaller than those two entries I told you about earlier. However, there's a column that is no longer in your financial statements that used to be in your financial statements. So from a qualitative standpoint, if we don't call it out as a restatement, it looks weird that you're missing a column from one year to the next without acknowledging that. And that's essentially the whole reason for the restatement for that. During the course of our audit, we did not identify any unusual policies or methods or any alternative accounting treatments that are outside the scope of GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. In developing any set of financial statements, there are estimates, some more significant than others, that management has to apply their judgment on how to value or measure a particular dollar within the financial statements. Not every dollar in there is easily tiable to one invoice or to one cash receipt. The most significant of those would be your pension and OPEB liabilities, as well as your IBNR, incurred but not reported liabilities for claims, medical or insurance claims, your allowance for uncollectible receivables, potential commitments and contingent liabilities that may be out there, and then the impairment of long-lived assets, as well as the depreciation of those capital assets. We've evaluated management's process and how they develop those estimates, tested them for reasonableness. For example, pension and OPEB liabilities is getting the actuary report. What are their mortality tables? For OPEB, what does that look like compared to national trends on what they're using for their mortality tables? Sorry, tongue twister there. Et cetera, et cetera. From a financial statement disclosures, outside those bullet areas, there's no other disclosures within the financial statements that are particularly sensitive. Those ones are just more sensitive from an estimation standpoint rather than being able to be tied to an individual invoice. Getting closer to the end, so bear with me. These are the other required communications that I have to say, regardless of the size, scope of the audit. If you read the headers, it looks pretty omnibus, if you will, or ominous, if you will. Disagreements with management, consultations with other people, difficulties encountered to perform in the audit. There is no items to report under these outside the obvious of the timeline of issuing the financial statements. Management has been great. I appreciate all of Lisa's help throughout the audit process from beginning back in August to today. So I do truly appreciate all her assistance and her staff behind her getting these financial statements written and everything we needed for the audit. Significant issues discussed with management. We always have varying conversation with management. The main point from the auditing standards there is none of our decisions on what the financial statements may or may not look like were contingent upon the hiring of us as the external auditor. And then no going concern issues. And the last piece of the other material communications, we do obtain a representation letter from management saying, hey, what you've told us is true, and you don't know of anything that you should have told us that you didn't, et cetera, et cetera. Those letters are pretty boilerplate, even from firm to firm to firm. If management would have significant pushback on any particular representation or whatnot, this is the auditing standard to where I would tell you what those items are. We did not receive any pushback from management on any of those particular representations. And we received that letter dated June 30, 24. This last slide, although the formatting's a little off, is primarily just to make you aware of what's coming down the pike. There are, for June 30, 24, I mentioned is technically GASB 100. I removed that off of here because Onslow County has already implemented that for June 30, 2023. There are a number of AICPA standards that will be effective for 24. And then fiscal year 25 will be GASB 101, compensated absences and certain risk disclosures. And then in 26 will be GASB 103, which is a lot lighter than what the GASB originally had planned on putting in there. But these could have a significant impact, particularly compensated absences will be the next real big one to kind of pull through. That'll take a significant amount of time for management to prepare for. And we're more than happy to talk with management on that in advance to kind of get that stuff going. But with that, as I mentioned, that's kind of more just this is what's coming down the pike from a financial reporting standpoint. But with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have in regards to our audit.
Questions?
All right, you know, is there a reason why that the audit was late?
Overall, it's kind of just the perfect storm, if you will. I believe there were 3 system implementations during the course of the year. There might have been 5 financial officers over the past 3 years. We were brought on in August of 23 to start an audit that's initially due in October of 23. So it's just a magnitude of varying things all compiling to each other that just kind of take time to get through. So I wouldn't say there's one particular item that caused everything to be delayed.
All right, I totally understand about the personnel changes and everything else. But we presented an audit to our citizens. Our budget to our citizens without an audit. County manager stated it's the first time he's ever done that. And you say everything is great. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. Mr. Miller, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, I was watching the slides and listening to your comments and stuff. I'm not concerned about the time frame. I think you did a wonderful job. You came in here things happen. OBE, overcome by events, period. That's the way it goes. We had personnel changes. I appreciate you adapting to that, getting to this and getting it finished. It seems very thorough to me, very exhaustive. A lot of the stuff, I'll be honest with you, went over my head, but that's, I'm not a financial guy whatsoever, but it was very interesting, and I was looking at your slides, so I just want to commend you on a job well done and your thoroughness of it, and I appreciate you presenting it to us tonight.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Miller, thank you very much for coming in and presenting this and getting it taken care of for us. We appreciate your efforts and what you've done. Thank you.
Y'all have a wonderful evening.
You too, thank you. We'll move into item 5, public hearing, and Mr. Smitherman.
Yes, sir. First public hearing this evening will be presented by Carter Metcalf, and it is rezoning 2024-08, David Cox.
Good evening, Board, Chairman and Vice Chairman. First public hearing tonight of 3, and our only rezoning is the Cox rezoning request, PRZ 2024 number 8. The applicant is David and Leanne Cox, and the owner is just David Cox. Overview of the request is from community business, or CB, to rural agriculture, RA. One property in question with the tax map number of 33-20.2. The location is at Fowler Manning Road, and that is in the Richlands Township. The rezoning area is 8.94 acres, and the existing use is residential. So look at the services for the property. There's a 4-inch Onslow water main along Fowler Manning Road. For the wastewater in the area, some properties are served by individual septic systems depending on their use, but there is a 6-inch Onslow sewer force main along Fowler Manning Road. Fire service for the area is Northwest Onslow with an ISO rating of 4. The traffic count that the staff was able to verify came from 2019 with a trip count of 2,800. Staff estimate the capacity at 14,800 for Fowler Manning Road. School servicing the property would be Heritage Elementary, Trexler Middle, and Richlands High School. Look at the property in question there. You can see that light blue color is that community business, and while the surrounding area is rural agriculture. To compare the two districts, community business has no minimum lot size, and its purpose is to accommodate the establishment of small-scale retail and service uses that would serve nearby communities. While you compare to rural agriculture, has a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet, and its purpose is to maintain the rural development patterns that preserve the agricultural character of the county and accommodating low-density single-family and limited commercial uses. The purpose of agricultural forestry, which is the future land use designation, is to preserve large areas in which most lands have a high potential or are actively being farmed or forested, and of course in an economically sustainable manner. When we look at the comprehensive plan, outlines that dark blue category is that agricultural forestry designation. And you see there's no regulated flood zones or streams there that would be regulated in the nearby vicinity. So we look at reasonableness in the public interest. It can be considered reasonable due to the subject property being adjacent to rural agriculture, being aligned with the future land use category, and as well is consistent with the character of area. It's supported by 4 different policies of the comprehensive plan. We look at planning board. At May 2nd, the planning board met, and the applicant was present for the meeting. No citizens spoke against the request, and there was no military impacts presented. The Onslow County Planning Board recommended unanimously for approval of the request. Then as we look at the surrounding area, you can see the property there highlighted in red on Fowler Manning Road. See, there's a variety of low-density residential and agricultural uses nearby. And as you could take a closer look at the property, you can see that there it is for residential use. And this is what it looks like from the road. That is the entrance road there that you can see in that sandy area that leads back. But that house in the distance is not the property. That's actually the adjacent property. The property in question is really more behind those trees. So as respectfully requested, the Board of Commissioners consider the proposed zoning map amendment of PRZ 2024 number 8 and adopt a statement of consistency for the amendment and authorize the chairman to sign the necessary documents on behalf of the county. This concludes the staff presentation.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I will open the public hearing for this rezoning matter. And seeing that no one has signed up, I will now close the public hearing and turn it over to you, sir.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, hearing none, the motion carries. Moving right on to the item B there with the event venue parking zoning text amendment.
Yes, sir. The next item will be presented by Mr. Metcalf. It is a text amendment request by Charles F. Riggs and Associates regarding parking requirements.
The second item before you tonight is a text amendment to the zoning ordinance for event venue parking, ZTA 2024 number 1. The applicant, as Mr. Smitherman said, is Charles F. Riggs and Associates, and they are here tonight. So we look at an overview of the request. Section 10.9D details the parking lot standards in the zoning ordinance. And for when a new building is constructed or the expansion of an existing parking area that is more than 20 spaces, they're required to adhere to those standards. So if a new building is constructed and the required parking spaces based on how you're using the building comes to 20 spaces, or you're expanding your parking lot by 20 spaces. Now, the ordinance does allow for certain uses, or again, those required less than 20, to not adhere to those standards. And to simply put, that means that they can have an unpaved parking lot, provided that those primary access ways are of all-weather material. So the standard in question tonight is for the auditorium, indoor event venue, and indoor theaters, or simply, again, for the event venues, if they would have one parking space for every 4 seats in their largest assembly area. And that's how we would treat an outdoor event venue. They usually have some sort of designation for assembly, and we'll look at the capacity there and following that same calculation. But the proposal tonight would be to add in event venues there under section .109DB as in that list, that regardless of the calculation size, they would be permitted to have an unpaved parking lot. Look at reasonableness in the public interest. It could be considered reasonable due to the county's goal of promoting cultural and recreational opportunities in the county. Certainly lowering the regulatory requirement could potentially enable increasing those opportunities. But at the same token, it could be considered unreasonable due to the fact that event venues could already have an unpaved parking lot depending on the required spaces that they would be required to have. So the Planning Board met at May 2nd. And voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request. The applicant spoke on behalf of it, no citizen spoke against it, and no military impacts were presented before the Planning Board. So as respectfully requested, the Board of Commissioners consider the proposed zoning text amendment of ZTA 2024 number 1 and adopt a statement of consistency for the amendment and authorize the chairman to sign necessary documents on behalf of the county.
Thank you, Mr. Metcalf. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I will open the public hearing for this text amendment. And the only speaker to sign up is Charles Riggs, and he may come forward now.
Good evening, Chairman, Vice Chairman, Commissioners. Charles Riggs, 502 New Bridge Street. We brought this text amendment to you request because one of my clients is proposing an event venue located adjacent to the Atlantic Intercoastal Waterway down in Holly Ridge. In this area, we're trying to keep it passive, low impact, environmentally friendly. And with today's technology, you can actually have grassed parking lots with a grass paver 2 system. So it's basically sod, and you can drive across it. In our fire truck, it will handle our fire truck. And we feel like the event venue is only going to be used once or twice a month. It's not used that often, so it's comparable to the religious institutions or recreational facilities. You know, and of course, in the county itself, we've got agencies or companies or even the school system, even the Onslow County Park System. They have areas where they're parking on the grass or parking on pervious gravel. So we feel like this is a good blend to have event venue included in this text amendment. All right. So I'll be glad to answer any questions now or afterwards. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this time we'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the board for deliberation.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. Don't think Mr. Metcalf gets to stop yet. I think he's still coming back up.
Yes, sir. Mr. Metcalf has the next item, which is also a zoning text amendment.
Another zoning text amendment item. This is ZTA 2024 number 2, or section 4.8G, the zoning text amendment. One second, a little technical difficulty there. So the applicant is the Onslow County Planning and Development Department. This was a staff-sponsored amendment to the zoning ordinance. In this section, it deals with after rezoning, and it gets denied, what are the next steps for the applicant? So currently the standard is following a denial of a rezoning map amendment, the Board of Commissioners cannot consider another rezoning map amendment for the period of 12 months. Doesn't matter if it is the same or if it is different, the property itself is essentially locked. And that standard is there detailed before you, that again, the property itself gets a lock to prevent essentially someone resubmitting applications. Because certainly we have many rezoning applications going on. So the proposal to adjust this text would be to add this additional statement that says, and however though, unless a new application is submitted, that is substantially and materially different than the initial application. So essentially the same exact submittal could not be submitted within the year time frame, but if an applicant got denied and wanted to submit something that is substantially and materially different, they could. That way, the property is not locked out for a year, but they have the opportunity to come back before the board if it's a different application. Could be considered reasonable and in the public interest because, again, the property is the same, but the request would be different. It would be a different request coming before the board. Went before Planning Board at June 6th. They voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request. The applicant spoke on behalf of the request, and no citizen spoke against it. There were no military impacts presented at the Planning Board. So it's respectfully requested that the Board of Commissioners consider the proposed zoning text amendment of ZTA 2024 number 2, adopt a statement of consistency for the amendment, and authorize the chairman to sign the necessary documents on behalf of the county. This concludes the staff presentation.
This time, Mr. Chairman, I'll open the public hearing, and as that no one signed up, we will close the public hearing and turn it over to you, sir.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, I had a question. Substantially different application, does that mean it would have to be a different type of zoning than the one previously requested? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. That would be one of the ways it could be substantially different. The other way is it could be a conditional rezoning, so just a completely different type. So, for example, if someone had submitted for a commercial district and it was denied, or residential district, and they wanted to bring back a site-specific vesting plan with conditions that the commissioners could review, and again, we negotiate with the applicants, that would also be considered substantially different. So that, because it's then a conditional, insert zoning name here.
So to piggyback on what he just said, because I was thinking the same thing, it sounds very subjective to say substantially different. Will you have some kind of guidelines that you might set up just because, people are going to try to find a way in if there's a loophole?
No, absolutely. And so our guidance for applicants already, because we've had several who have been interested, is it needs to be a different zoning district, it needs to be a conditional zoning district, or again, the county has to adopt a new plan. So any of those metrics could trigger one, but we always provide documentation to applicants after their hearings, approval or denial, and we're going to make that a part of that package that we send to them.
Just so there's nobody feeling as though they're getting a special deal,
Absolutely.
Keep it uniform.
This is one of those situations where we have to balance the concerns of the people who live around the location and the property owners. And, people don't want to have to feel like they have to go back every month and defend their property. But by the same token, we don't want to tie up a property owner for 12 months and tell them that now you can't do anything with your property for 12 months. So, I mean, I think this is a pretty good balance for where we need to be to protect the adjoining property owners, but also protect the owner of the subject properties.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. All right, move right on to item 6, and Turkey Creek Fire Rescue Jet Ski and Trailer request. I think that's Mr. Bryson, isn't it?
Yes, and he's right here. Emergency Services Director Norman Bryson is going to present this matter to you.
Good evening, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and Commissioners. The request you have before you comes from Turkey Creek Fire and Rescue to use tourism funds to purchase a jet ski and trailer to haul the jet ski around for $25,000. The reason for this request is Turkey Creek Fire and Rescue covers approximately 16.8 miles of coastline and New River here in Onslow County, as well as responding mutual aid to 11.7 miles of North Topsail Beach. In 2023, they responded to 29 water rescues, and when we originally wrote this document, they had responded to 9 in May, but now they've already got another 16 water rescues that they've responded to as well, which means they are almost meeting up to what they did last year. This went before the Fire Rescue Commission in their May 20th meeting and was recommended to move forward for approval. Tonight I have both myself as well as the Fire Chief, Ricky Hardis from Turkey Creek Fire and Rescue, to be able to answer any questions that you may have. It is respectfully requested that the Board of Commissioners consider the request to purchase a jet ski trailer with total cost $25,000 with the use of county tourism funds, and if approved, authorize the county manager to sign the necessary documents to effect the purchase.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, I have a question and a comment. Mr. DeSelms, don't we have to prove that this is connected to heads on beds if we're doing tourism? Is that correct?
Right, we have special legislations. It's not quite heads on beds. I can get the exact language for you, but it does have to be connected to tourism. You're correct.
Or how is that connection have to be drawn there? I always understood, we always said heads on beds was a phrase I think you've used in the past. What is the wording there?
I will get that for you.
Our consideration, the reason we recommend it is because with the people coming to our area, using these waterways, which would be tourism coming here. Now, some of the people may definitely be people who reside here, but from talking with Chief Hardison, several of these people that come into the community are tourists that are coming into the area that are not tied to Onslow County.
A lot of people come from Jones County, Duplin County, Wilmington, no matter, up from north. There are a lot of people that swim our beaches, not just the residents. And I mean, you go down to the beach, North Topsail Beach, you can talk to several people, just some casual conversation, and find out they're not from here. They're down here from Raleigh. I know several people that have homes here. They come down to the beaches, so I think it's a good use of funds, and if we can use it, let's do it.
The point that if it was connected to heads on beds, I would have to do a great deal of mental gymnastics to connect this request with the heads on beds, is what I'm saying, is because how would anybody outside of Onslow County know that perhaps our waterways were safer unless we had a plan to promote that, hey, we had so many saves by people on a jet ski that went out and saved people, and how are we going to promote that to let people know that perhaps our waterways are safer and that type of thing?
I have the legislation. It's Onslow County shall deposit the proceeds of the occupancy tax in the general fund of the county to be used only to further the development of travel, tourism, and conventions in the county.
So what would be our plan to connect this back to people traveling to Onslow County to let them know that here's the reason that you want to come, because this is how this jet ski is going to make our waterways safer than, say, Carteret counties or whoever?
It's providing us a safety measure for being able to help rescue, and or sometimes it's not even necessary rescues. It's people come here, they run out of gas, they call 911, we go out and pull them, Turkey Creek will go out and bring them back to docks and stuff. So to us, it is providing that level of safety for people coming here into our community.
Yeah, I just don't know that people are going to know that outside of, maybe people in Onslow County won't even know that, most of them. But especially outside of Onslow County, how will they know?
I think
That's the draw. If there's got to be a draw to accompany the tourism directive.
Right, are you suggesting that there be some public campaign to kind of let the folks
Yeah, that's
know?
the only way I could see how you could connect that back to tourism in order to draw those folks, because the reason we're implying that they would be coming is because the safety of our waters is better than other areas, or at least that's my understanding of it.
How many jet skis are we talking about?
Just one.
Just one jet ski? What have we used in the past?
So they actually have boats that they've been using. So in this situation, if I could, I'd like to bring up Chief Hardison to be able to talk specifically about what he uses for water rescues in his direct district, if I could, please.
Can I just add here, I don't know that, is your issue not necessarily with the jet ski, but it's with where the money's coming from?
Well, I don't understand.
Both.
I don't understand the connection back to tourism. It requires a great deal of mental gymnastics on my part to get back to tourism to get this.
And my question is to Mr. Smitherman, can they designate where the money comes from? Is that something that happens at the, your level?
Who do you mean by they?
Well, can a department designate where the money would come from versus just having it, we would like to get this, where should we have the money come from? Is that making
I don't know how to
sense?
answer that question except to say they don't have any money to make these purchases without your appropriation. So they're
Okay.
asking for an appropriation and
they
suggesting that
picked
the
it.
appropriation
Okay.
come from tourism instead of capital reserve or general fund operating or what have you.
Okay, I just didn't understand the process of it.
Can I get somebody to answer my question, please?
Sure, sorry.
Okay.
Good evening. We currently have a 21-foot skiff and a 25-foot skiff.
Okay.
But when you're launching boats with the traffic from tourism, it is a very timely process getting to the docks. It also takes more manpower than we feel like we could take a jet ski with minimal manpower and get there as a quick response, as opposed to putting the 21-foot and the 25-foot in.
We wouldn't necessarily be putting gasoline on top of a jet ski and going out and refueling the boat.
No. That would be an abnormal thing. I'm not AAA.
Okay.
I'm not CETO.
I don't have a problem, Chief, to be honest with you, about using the funds for this. It's a necessity for saving lives. And that's the response that we should look at.
Right. And Mr. Price, to your question, unfortunately, the good Lord built it, and they're coming. The tourists are there. I can tell you, in my years of doing this, probably 1% of what I respond to in a water rescue is a resident of Onslow County. So it's given to the tourism.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the tourists aren't there. I was just saying that I thought that we were required to have a connection back to enticing tourists to Onslow County according to the mandate. Or maybe I misunderstand the mandate. Is it supposed to entice people to come to Onslow County in order to spend those funds on that enticement?
No, it reads to be used only to further the development of travel, tourism, and conventions in the county.
So
Let me ask you a question, Brett.
developing tourism, as I understand it, is bringing people to the county.
That's the legislation you just read right there.
That's correct, yes.
Brett, let me ask you a question from a legal standpoint. Are we within our parameters to use tourism funds?
Well, I think Commissioner Price has a good point. I do think like lifeguards, for example, are something that definitely promotes tourism. You can see them out there. People like to go near lifeguard stands and things of that nature. And if there was a tie to this apparatus in tourism, if it's something that people know about, I do think we get there.
Using what you just said about the lifeguards, okay, so this is the way I view it. Okay, you got a jet ski, you go to every major beach, Myrtle Beach, Conway, whatever it is, you're going to have lifeguards equipped with jet skis, especially Myrtle Beach. Jet skis are a quick and decisive way to get to a person, especially one that is out in the undercurrent.
If it gets in a
They're getting
river
pulled
current.
out. A jet ski is going to get there a lot quicker than a skiff. I can guarantee you that.
That's right.
And that can make a difference between life or death. And so I don't have a problem with this. And if we can justify it on a tourism funds, have at it. And
And
if
the
we could,
reason-
I'd give you more because I think that's necessary. And how does that promote tourism? Well, saving lives, I think, helps promote tourism on our beaches. Because you got an apparatus in place that is designed to save lives. They got quick access. That's going to draw more tourism because they're going to say, hey, it's pretty safe. They've got jet skis there, so there's not really much of a danger. That's going to promote people, in my opinion, to come to our beaches, and that's what we want. So I think a jet ski is a great idea, and we're only asking for one. Actually, you should probably use several, so many people in the undertow.
Our theory in that is North Topsail Beach has a jet ski. This would give us a jet ski. We do not put one vessel in the water by itself. We have agreements with Camp Lejeune. If we launch boats, they launch boats, vice versa, for safety reasons. Our reasons for requesting it through tourism money was to not put a strain on the fire service fund because it's not, quote, for fighting fire. The two boats that we currently have, we raised money and purchased ourselves through the years. Just the community has given money to get those. And it's really, yes, it's helping the community because people in the community get money from these tourists coming in. So it's one big circle. And we just felt like there was an opportunity to use some of those funds to put something back to the tourists.
I see the points on both sides. I see what Commissioner Price is saying, but I'm on the opposite side of that because I see the benefits of it. And if it justifies, like I asked you before, and we can articulate why we're using tourism funds, go for it. I think it's innovative. I think it's smart, and I think that you need it. And like I said, I've seen jet skis in action at Myrtle Beach and other places where they've literally gone out there trying to rescue somebody caught in an undertow. And I think it's a great idea.
Gentlemen.
And I think by putting the lettering on the
Wait a
side
minute,
would
Ricky,
show that.
let me put something right out there, right solid. This is a no-brainer. But the other thing is, the Board of Commissioners put together the Fire Commission. The Fire Commission unanimously asked for this jet ski. We should support the Fire Commission. They're the ones that asked for it. That's the bottom line. I mean, you put this board together so this board can tell the Board of Commissioners what they need for rescue and saving lives.
I agree.
Bottom line.
I got one more question, if you don't mind. Who is going to be the primary owner of that? Who is the titles that going to go to?
I can't tell you that. I know who the title is on everything else that's titled to Turkey Creek Fire and Rescue Incorporated.
This is if I may, Mr. Chairman, this is an issue that I know the board has dealt with far longer than I've been here for several years about titling. A piece of apparatus like this has absolutely primary purpose in Turkey Creek. I think everybody can agree with that. However, if it was titled in the county and assigned to Turkey Creek, we could have the opportunity to, maybe something's going on in Swansboro and we need to have extra support out there. And emergency services could operate such a thing. I don't even know if that makes sense, actually, but I know that this board has talked a lot about titles, and that's probably, Mr. Scott brings up a good point. Do you do something different at this point in time on titling?
So my opinion would be, it would be titled to us and have a clause if something happened to us. And mutual aid agreements is going to allow us to take it anywhere it needs to go. But if it's titled to the county, then the county's going to have to carry the insurance on it. They're going to be responsible for the repairs and stuff on it. Then does it fall into an agreement that only the people can drive it as county employees like county vehicles? That's the thing that comes into place. I don't have a problem in signing any document that says if anything happens to Turkey Creek Fire and Rescue, it's for the citizens. Everything that sits in my buildings is for the citizens.
So an MOU would be a perfect document.
And I think the contract we have in place would cover, that. But
So the current contract that we have in place is a mutual aid agreement that covers across all departments. If the question goes back to the ownership of the item, currently that is one thing that we have been in discussions for some time in trying to draft new contracts within the Fire Rescue Commission about what would happen in the dissolution of a fire department and where would that assets and equipment go.
Mr. Chairman, I call the question.
All right. Mr. Hardison, thank you, sir, for coming here tonight and doing this. At the end of the day, I do have one question for you, though, Ricky. How many times, just over the last 2 weekends, have we had water rescue 911 called that you and North Topsail responded to?
Well, I can tell you, just on July the 4th, I left to go out of town on vacation. My phone blowed up. We had 4 in a matter of 30 minutes' time. One of them was a fatality.
Yep, absolutely.
And that was a case of where Camp Lejeune was actually out with their boat at the time and come up on it and still was not quick enough.
All right. All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming up.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign.
No.
Motion carries 6-1 for a jet ski down at Turkey Creek to make sure we can get in the water on the 16th. Is it 16 miles of North Topsail?
Well, no, it's not that far. If you go down the whole beach, you've got about 12 miles in the inland.
And then the intercoastal. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So motion carries. Thank you very much. And now we'll move to the Part B, voting designation for the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners 117th Annual Conference. Mr. Smitherman?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can resoundingly put this back in your lap because the board is going to need to appoint 2 people to be voting delegates at your convention conference of all 100 counties in early August.
Right.
I know that there are more than 2 of you planning to go. So we just need you to nominate or make a motion for a voting delegate and an alternate among yourselves.
I'd like to make, Chairman, I'd like to make a nomination that Commissioner Price has done this in the past, and I'd like for him to continue to do so because he's done a great job. So I'd like to nominate Commissioner Price. And you said 2 nominations, correct,
An
David?
alternate, yes.
And I'd like to nominate Lisa Carpenter as the alternate.
I agree.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Hearing none, motion carries. We are now moving to the item of the resolution. This resolution is 24014, resolution to repeal North Carolina General Statute 105-369C. Mr. Smitherman,
Yes, sir.
who would we like to
Well, I can
share
get it
this resolution?
started, and I think there'll be others that will want to chime in. We learned very recently, Kevin Turner, our tax administrator, made us aware of this, and many of you have become aware that there was a provision passed during the short session this year that is quite onerous and places a considerable burden of labor on our tax department. And as you all know, that every March or so, we advertise delinquent tax accounts. That is on average a 3,000 customer or parcel listing. Somehow during the short session, a very small phrase got added to our statutes that require us to physically post all 3,000 properties at the property site. So imagine the Planning and Development Department's little sign that says rezoning. Imagine doing 3,000 of those on 3,000 distinct parcels every year. We are very much against this new session law or amended law. And at Mr. Chairman Foster's request, we have developed a resolution for you to consider this evening that requests our delegation that when they go back for these mini sessions they're talking about, or as soon as they get back in Raleigh next year, they repeal this provision of state law.
Can we have Ben read this into the record?
I'm sure we can.
All right, Mr. Warren, have at it.
I would be glad to. All right, State of North Carolina, County of Onslow, Resolution 24-014, Resolution to repeal North Carolina General Statute 105-369C. Whereas Session Law 2024-25, Regulatory Reform Act of 2024, has rewritten North Carolina General Statute 105-369C to require an additional means of notice to advertise property tax liens in addition to those currently required by law. And whereas this addition would require tax collectors to advertise a tax lien by posting a notice of lien in a conspicuous manner on the property parcel to be advertised, and whereas Onslow County currently has over 3,000 parcels that would require the yard signage being posted on the property parcel as outlined in the rewritten statute, and whereas in doing so, it would be an excessive burden on Onslow County staff and require additional resources to produce and post yard signage. Now therefore be it resolved that the Onslow County Board of Commissioners strongly encourages the North Carolina General Assembly to repeal North Carolina General Statute 105-369C so as to not divert county staff and resources and allow staff to continue to deliver exceptional services with good governance. And be it further resolved that the clerk is to provide a copy of this resolution to the Onslow County, North Carolina General Assembly delegation, adopted this 15th day of July, 2024.
Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I would want the public to understand that posting 3,000 signs on 3,000 different parcels, you know, a lot of the parcels that we've actually foreclosed on over the last several years have been parcels that are hard to access, that are landlocked, parcels that are out in the middle of the woods that nobody even knows where the property lines are without surveys. I think people need to understand how onerous this would be on our county to try to enforce this. It may require us to go out and survey properties to find where a property actually is. It may require our people to trudge through the woods and the mud and the wetlands to get to property. It may require us to try to get authority from adjoining property owners to actually access the property that we need to post. It's actually a ridiculous requirement that is going to be absolutely terrible for us. We've worked for 8 years now that I've been here to increase our tax collection rate so that that we can budget based on a very good tax collection rate. And this is going to be very difficult and challenging and cause us not to be able to collect the percentage of taxes due that we have in the last several years. So I think it's important for the public to know that we're not opposed to telling people that they owe property taxes, and we're not opposed to putting it in the paper and posting it on the website and trying every way that we can to let people know that they owe property taxes. But this requirement is absolutely ridiculous, and it'll cost us a lot of money to try to do this. And I can see legal fees because people will claim that we didn't post it properly. I can see, survey fees and all kinds of fees that could be associated with trying to post on all these different properties. You got property owners that live in California and all over the country, and it's not the county's fault that they don't read the newspaper or pay their property taxes or look at the website. They know they owe property here, and they know that they have to pay property taxes. I pay my property taxes. These people here pay their property taxes, and everybody else needs to pay their fair share of property taxes. So I'm totally in agreement with this, and I didn't want to get on a soapbox, but I do want people to understand that we're not trying to not notify people. But this is a ridiculous requirement for counties, and for the state to put this on us is ridiculous. So that's all I'll say.
So put some of it in perspective is, Sheriff Thomas, how many people on your civil division that are issue warrants or take warrants or subpoenas out into the county? How many do you have doing that for us? 8 of them. Yep. So, and there's a good chance that Sheriff's Office might have to do some of this because people are really not thrilled when the tax office stops to put a placard
shook his head
on the
real quick.
ground. And tax office, you'd have to get a couple more cars and a couple more people. By the time we finish posting the 3,000 placards, we will come back to the building, pick up the next year's, because we'll probably be into the next year, and turn around to go post those again. And right now, our collection rate is what, Mr. Turner? 98.6.
Body temperature.
I think that's pretty good. It's good work on the tax department's good work and taking care of that. And this, putting this burden on us could end up in Carter's because he has experience in placing placards. So I think this is a great resolution. I do believe our leadership in General Assembly, now that we have had some conversations, will be very receptive to this and realizing the burden this places on the counties. So that being said, all in favor of the motion, or the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. So now we have nothing on the consent agenda items. We'll move right to the manager's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly this evening, I'm really excited, and I know you are too, that we have officially begun the strategic planning process, and we are engaging our external stakeholders. I hope you have heard from the number of people that I've heard from out in the community that are excited and willing to participate and are submitting their comments. As all of us have been interviewed, they're being interviewed too. And soon we'll go, excuse me, to a next phase where the public has opportunities through focus groups, through electronic means and other means to contribute their thoughts to the strategic planning process. And that public interaction will continue for quite a few more weeks, and there'll be more public interaction later in the process as this develops over the coming 10 months or so. Also happy to report that we have hired a new finance director. His name is Kevin Patterson. He will be starting on August the 12th. He comes to us as he's a CPA. He's also a former finance director and county manager in North Carolina and brings a lot of experience, and we're super excited to have him coming on board. And then finally, Chairman Foster and myself met with representatives from all but one of our towns in the county. We had an outstanding meeting of mayors and managers last week. Surf City participates in that, even though they just have a tiny little bit. But we had a great exchange about different ways we can help each other. We talked a lot about the concerns of the number of accidents we've had on our beaches this year. And I know that there are a couple of municipalities reviewing what they do, and we have opened the door and said we'd like to be a good partner in whatever solutions or mitigating measures that they might come up with or would like to discuss. And we had many other opportunities to speak about other issues of common interest. And that's all for my report today, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Smitherman. Who would like to start with commissioner comments this evening?
The thing that we were talking about today on the audit, and it's going to be very brief. This is the first time in my knowledge that I've ever heard of Onslow County not having an audit when it's time for budget. I'm very concerned about it. We have had a lot of turnovers, and I realize that. But it is absolutely we need to check the blocks and make sure we are transparent with everybody. And that's my concern about it. And I know there's a lot of people that don't agree with that, but we must be transparent when we're doing the people's business. And I feel this year that we failed the people. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I am going to clarify some things with our accountant, now our county manager. And I would love to have a copy of that entire audit, because we got a snapshot of 37 pages. And he was holding his hand up with a lot more pages. So I'd like to have our copy, because I did not receive a copy of it. And thank you and good night.
Next. Anybody?
Thank everybody for being here.
Royce?
I'll take it, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I was honored to attend the Ocean City Jazz Festival, 75th anniversary of Ocean City. And if you don't know about Ocean City, it was the first community on the East Coast where African Americans were allowed to own property on the beach. It's a crazy thought that back then some people couldn't own property on the beach. But Ocean City celebrated 75 years. I want to thank this board for passing a resolution of appreciation and congratulations for them that I was able to present at the Jazz Festival. And just wanted to thank them for the invitation and thank this board for passing that resolution and congratulate them on 75 years. And I hope y'all have a great evening. Thank you.
In the light of the events of the last few days, I'd ask that you continue to pray for our nation, for the leaders of our nation that sit on both sides of the aisle in the tragic wake of what happened in Pennsylvania. And also thank the board for their support and continuing asking me to serve as a delegate. Glad to do it. I enjoy doing it. Have a good night.
And on that, I'd love to say thank you for nominating me to be an alternate, and I will serve with pride if that's what I need to be doing. So thank you very much. As probably everybody listening knows, I serve on the Airport Advisory Committee, and there's always great stuff going on over there, so I always like to bring it to light because that is one of the crown jewels, I think, of our county. Update on the runway expansion project. It is moving ahead smoothly. And if you talk to one of the people that serves on the board, he would say that we're actually ahead of the DOT, imagine that, in the way that we're moving. In one aspect of that. The airport is looking to expand flights with existing airlines and also seeking some new services too, which is really exciting. I'm not going to say where those destinations might be because I'll get in trouble, but it's pretty exciting. And I want a shout out to Kyle, who has been overseeing the fixed base operations over there. He is taking on a new position and leaving and going to Concord with his new wife, and I just want to say thank you so much to him for his really great work over the last year in particular, because he's been instrumental in nearly doubling the aircraft that we have there from 9 to 17 over the last year, which is really amazing, which does bring in money to Onslow County. And he also announced that we now have, there's 4 aircraft for the flight school that are over there, so anybody that wants to learn how to fly, there's your opportunity. So fly OAJ for sure. And one other thing I want to say is just, unfortunately, I've had another friend of mine who had the need of EMS services lately, back on July the 5th. And I just wanted to publicly acknowledge, and I don't know their last names, but Megan, who is the EMS coordinator, and Mike, who's a paramedic, for doing an absolutely fine job. My girlfriend was raving about how professional that they were and how attentive they were to everything that she had going on, and she's doing better and at home, and so I thank you for that, and God bless. Have a great week.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
The only thing I want to comment, because it's something that's bothered me for the last 2 days, and I watched it over and over again, the assassination attempt on former President Trump. Whatever your political affiliation, it doesn't really matter. We can blame the left, we can blame the right, we can blame the media for causing this. But I agree with Trump when he changed his speech that it's a time for our country to get unified, even in Onslow County. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Quit throwing bad words at each other, because we're both guilty of, Republican and Democrats and independents, throwing out hateful things at each other for no reason. And then one kid decided to act on his own and take a pot shot at the president, which was a pretty good pot shot. for a 20-year-old using iron sights on an AR-15 at 160 yards away. It's a pretty good shot. And hadn't been for providential guidance, I firmly believe that. If you watch the video and you see Trump at that moment turn his head, and if he would have kept it there that split second, he would have been shot in the temple with a 5.56 round. And I don't know if you've ever seen what a 5.56 round does, but it's pretty devastating. So, you know, this is a time, we've got the Republican National Convention going on right now in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the Democratic Convention next week. And it's a time for Onslow citizens, it's a time for the United States, for people to come together. You know, because I wouldn't want to wish this on President Biden or any other political figure that's running. Anybody. You can't, you know, to have that hatred for somebody to take a shot and try to take them out of this world because you disagree with them, to me, that's the utter end, or that's the utter beginning of evil. You know, we're allowed to disagree with each other. We're allowed to disagree in a political way, in a professional way, and let it be at that, and go away disagreeing. So it really bothered me to watch that, and I watched that over and over again. And coming from a law enforcement background, I'm going to tell you, he's so lucky. And what I really don't like is how these Monday morning quarterbacks are criticizing the Secret Service. Now, there's going to be an investigation. They're going to talk about why was that man on the roof, all that stuff, but I'm not talking about that. That's the hot wash that comes after something like this. But I hear comments on both sides criticizing the female agent because she couldn't get her gun in her holster. It took her 3 or 4 tries. Has anybody in here been under fire? Been under stress? You don't get it right the first time. That adrenaline is pumping through you, and I got 2 guys over here to my right that can attest to that. We're all law enforcement. You get in a shooting or something like that, your adrenaline is flowing, the crap is literally hitting the fan, and you're trying to put your holster in, and you're going to criticize somebody for that? My salute goes out to the Secret Service who jumped on that stage, and they used their bodies to shield President Trump, to get him off that stage. And there's criticism why they didn't move off quickly, but they were given the all clear on the radio by the Secret Service counter snipers that the target was down. But even then, they still moved hastily. And I want to publicly say that those Secret Service agents that were out there, those 1811s that were out there, or whoever they may be, they put themselves in harm's way because they did not know if there's another shooter there. So when you hear somebody criticizing the Secret Service, remind them of what kind of a job that they do and what kind of job that they have, because they're putting it on the line 24/7. And those guys are working around the clock, especially on presidential details, every day of the week on shifts. So my salute to them. I'm proud of what happened. As far as the Secret Service is concerned, I'm disgusted at what happened to President Trump, and I'd be just as disgusted if it happened to President Biden or anybody else. There's no need for violence in this country when you disagree with somebody. And I really hope the people of Onslow County, Democrat, Independent, Republicans, could understand that and be friends, talk to each other, and not criticize each other, and not pummel each other on social media, et cetera. To be grown up enough to disagree, to agree to disagree, and be friends afterwards. That's my take on that. And I just wish our country the best. And I hopefully Donald Trump will get better, and I'm sure he will. But mark my words, if you watch that film, it was providential that he moved his head. There was no reason for it, and he is one blessed man. Have a great week. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. The events over the weekend, obviously, only thing you have to do is watch that, and it tugs at your emotions for this nation. I mean, I was much younger back in the attempt on President Reagan's life, but that stunned the country. We've been walking the halls when the Challenger exploded, and that stunned the country. And then Saturday, that too stuns the country. And that's where we have to really look in the mirror at the United States and what we've become with the rhetoric and the violence it creates. One thing I'd love for everybody in this nation to do for the next month is to turn off your social media, quit espousing hate, impact the pocketbook of Mark Zuckerberg, and let them know that we can exist without vitriol and hate through social media when it's a person you don't even know who they are and the things that you're saying to them. Also, just the family of the retired firefighter that lost his life Saturday. I took a few minutes and I read what his daughter said. They said he was a girl dad, 2 of them. And the last thing he did was push his wife and his daughter down and covered them and gave his life for them. That's what happened on Saturday. The loss of life at the hands of someone at 20 years old probably did a lot of reading of post, of rhetoric, of vitriol. I love to be able to sit down and have conversation with anybody and disagree, but at the end, let's sit down and break bread and go cast a ballot for who it is you choose to do. Because it's men like Carlos, the sheriff, and Ricky, Norm, and I have forgot the gentleman's name beside you. They put their lives on the lines every day. It's the retired law enforcement. It's those that served, those that, veterans, Vietnam, those that are veterans working in HR in Onslow County. Folks, that's the backbone of this nation, is that we are not a third world country where we burn and kill our own. What we do is wrap our arms around each other and we prepare to defend what the rest of the world wants. I believe we are the only nation that everybody wants to come to and nobody wants to leave. And it's because of who we are. We are a God-fearing nation that does it the right way. Even when we are wrong, we work to change it. Let's all embrace the United States and remind everyone of who we are. With that being said, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.